Today I'm here with Amy Figueroa, and she is also a lost mom who has built a company that helps women find a way to be able to stay home and run their own business. So, two things that are really near and dear to my heart. I love the business world. I love women being able to work in business and be with their families, support their families as well as be a really great mom too. So welcome, Amy. I'm so happy that you're here with us today.
Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So would you be willing to share your lost story with us?
Absolutely. So in 2017, I was pregnant with actually my fifth child, biological child, and we discovered went in for a regular checkup and found out that there was something not right with her heart rate. So I was sent in for monitoring and discovered at 7 months pregnant that there was something very wrong, that her heart was not developing correctly. And it took another month of testing and such to figure out what might be wrong or what might not be correct with her. And they finally determined through amniocentesis that she did have trisomy 13. And then the doctors let us know there was no way they could give us any idea how long she might live or what her quality of life may be. And so it was very late in the pregnancy. We did choose to have her induced labor, and she was born healthy enough that they felt that did not need any extra medical intervention. She was breathing on her own. Things were okay. We thought we would have at least a few months with her, possibly more. And then she just started failing right away within a couple of hours. And so she ended up passing away just 6 hours old. And it was pretty unexpected, even though we did have the diagnosis and we did know in advance that she wasn't going to be perfectly healthy and, I guess, normal. It was still a bit of a shock because we had no way of knowing that she would fail within hours and we would lose her that day. So, yeah. And then after she passed, they pretty much just sent us on home. There was really no support, nothing. I was just wheeled out as if I had just come in for a checkup or something. There was no postnatal care for me as a mother or maternity care, nothing. So I was just left to go home and grieve on my own, which was difficult.
I'm so sorry about your loss. And it just is something that is really just shocking. And I think sometimes too, the way that the medical system can either be really, really helpful in these times or make a really traumatic event even worse, which it
Yeah,
sounds like possibly that was your experience,
definitely.
and then left you to go home with no resources.
Right. Nothing. They actually recommended like joining a Facebook group for grieving moms and
Oh
which
gosh.
is of course helpful. And I don't
Yeah.
mean to downplay that. It's absolutely essential part of support. But as you well know, it takes more than a social media group to deal with that type of grief and loss and honestly sort of shock and trauma for yourself as you're riding the emotional and hormonal roller coaster simultaneously. It adds an extra element to the grief process when we're on the hormonal roller coaster that other losses don't necessarily involve. So
And for some reason, that hormonal shifting is something you don't expect.
definitely
I
not.
don't know why. Even if you have, I mean, you had 4 other children. I had 2, and for some reason it never occurred to me that my body was gonna go through all of these things, the same things it does when your baby's born living. So, how did you deal with it? And how did you go home and tell these 4 children that their baby sister, Catherine, wasn't coming home?
That was another element that I try as you might, you can never really prepare for telling them. So we came home and they came clamoring at the door. They wanted to see her. And of course, she wasn't there. So we had to try to explain to them, and they were really small, so they didn't quite understand it. And so we sat them down and we told them that she's not going to be coming home and that her heart wasn't able to support her, and, you know, had the talk with them. And they, of course, being young, they handled it, I think, a lot better than we did. Kids are so resilient and flexible. But it was extremely hard for me because here I was surrounded by these amazing blessings that I had so much difficulty bringing into the world to begin with, and yet missing their sibling. And I had this feeling of really guilt because I should just be thankful for the kids I have, right? But yet at the same time, this tremendous loss, this tremendous hole in our family existed and still exists, of course, to this day. I can feel her loss to this day. It's been 6 years next month, and I will still go to count them when we're, leaving someplace and feel like somebody's missing, and then, "Oh, no, no, everyone's here."
I've done that too, isn't that yeah,
It's
you
incredible.
just feel it, like
Mhm.
something is not there's something missing, someone missing. It's such a hard time. So what were the steps that you took to get yourself back on track and try to get
Sure.
some healing?
Yeah, so I started to plunge into a pretty deep depression. I'm sure you and other listeners can relate. So, and I realized, I have all these people depending on me, my children, my husband. So I just decided that I had to take control somewhere. And where that was starting with one tiny step. So one tiny thing, getting a shower that day. If that's all I could do that was out of my routine at that time, then that was success. And then once that became a habit, then, getting dressed in real clothes instead of my maternity, yoga style clothes, getting dressed. And then when that became a habit, adding another, maybe I throw on some makeup, maybe I do my hair, something that was dragging me forward little by little, cleaning up one pile of paperwork from the mail that, of course, I didn't feel like dealing with any of that stuff. And so picking a section and saying, okay, I'm going to deal with that today. Just building on those habits, just one tiny, tiny thing a day or even a week, however long it takes you. That was it started and then it compounds. So I was able to, improve pretty quickly from once I started to employ that process.
That is, I think, such great advice because depression can really take hold. And of course, it's so common after a loss. And when you were talking, it made me think about this book. It's by Ed Milet. And he talks about that same thing about just like, can I do 1 minute of walking? I mean, can I take
Yes.
a walk for 1 minute? And then tomorrow, can I do
Yes.
one more minute
Yes,
of just that one more thing is so
mhm,
powerful and
it
can
is.
really start to snap you out of this depression. And in the
Absolutely.
beginning, it might be just, can I get out of bed?
Yes. Yeah. Whatever it takes, just
So,
one thing. Choose one small thing. If that's it, maybe getting up, maybe eating your meals at the table with maybe eating at all. For
yeah.
some of us in that, maybe you're not eating. For me, it was like having to come back to the table and resume family life when there was someone missing was really difficult. And so that was one of the things I started focusing on was making sure I spend time in the middle of the family, not just one on one, not just, when it was nap time or something for one of them, but in general.
Yeah, because parenting while grieving is a whole other
Oh,
layer of grief, isn't it?
it
Because
is.
you're carrying the grief for them, you're carrying it for yourself. Tell us how you got started in your business.
Sure. So it was really in losing Catherine. When I sat there and looked at my surviving children, I realized that I really didn't want to leave them anymore. I wanted to be home with them. I wanted to spend every minute that I had available with them instead of trudging off to my little cubicle or a low wage. Every day I would be leaving them behind in the care of my older sons and while I go to work and my husband would tag team care with them. but I was away from them a lot, and I realized losing Catherine that I didn't wanna do that anymore. It's not that I ever really enjoyed it. I don't think any of us enjoy just, kind of leaving them, but it becomes this for me, it became sort of a salt in the wound, I guess, for losing her. So I decided to look into ways for me to make that happen. And I just took the plunge. I guess being in that grief mode gave me the courage to take a leap of faith that I probably wouldn't have taken if it weren't for having lost her so recently. And so I launched my virtual assistants business, and it just took off from one client to seven and grew from there. So I was able to bring in subcontractors and all of that, but I was able to be home with my kids full time, making income, everything. It's what I call my silver lining in that cloud.
It's such a great success story because it's something you might not have done. Did you have any more children?
I did not. She was the
No,
last,
she
but
was
that was
your
by choice. So,
okay.
but that's because we already had a large family, and and it was like, yeah, that's, I think we need to just focus on the ones that we have now. So,
Yeah. So, your business, is it just women or do you have some men?
it's all for me, it has all been women thus far, but yes, I turned around and decided to help. So many people were coming to me and asking me for help or advice on getting started that I decided that, okay, this is a thing. People really need this. And I created programs to help them get started. And my one of my main goals is to keep it really affordable, because there are lots of people out there teaching people to get started, but it's really costly. And if you're in a situation like I was at that time, that can be prohibitive. That can stop you in your tracks. If somebody wants $2,000 for a program up front, that can be prohibitive in that situation. But so mine is very low cost, less than $100 to get started. And I try to keep it that way on purpose, because this business is my passion project. It's not
Mm.
the 100% way I sustain my family. So I still serve clients just like my mentees do. I just do it because I want to help. I want to help women get out of the situation that I was in. So,
It's amazing. Did you return to work after your loss for a
yeah.
while?
Yes, I did. And so that was a journey in itself.
Yeah.
So tips for that, I would love to share: being proactive and taking control of the narrative before you head into the office. So for me, that was something that I did retroactively as I was there, and I realized that people were struggling with whether they wanted me to overshare or undershare. It was a difficult moment, not only for myself, but for my coworkers. So I realized that in retrospect that I would have sent out an email prior to returning to work, kind of giving them a heads up on, here's what happened, and then here's what I'm, willing to discuss, and not like, this is fine. These points are fine. These points I would rather not discuss right now at this time, or at work, to give them some guidelines. And I think that would have really helped them as well, because they felt awkward. They weren't sure exactly what to say or what not to say. And I think it could have saved both of us a lot of stress and time and
Yeah,
emotional.
that's such an important piece because you when you have your loss, you have your family, you're surrounded by your family, by your loved ones, and eventually, a lot of us have to go back to work, and that, I know with my clients, is a really big sticking point for them because it is. These people that you work with feel like they're entitled to all of the information.
That's true.
So I love that idea of sending out an email and just spelling it out.
Yeah.
And here's what I'm willing to do, and here's what I'm not willing to talk about. And I always think too, it's a great idea to have a work buddy who
Yeah.
can go before you and say, okay, she's
Yes.
coming back Friday.
Yes.
Here's how it
That's
needs to be because you don't want it to be uncomfortable for either one of you.
right. Right.
And I think without some sort of groundwork laid ahead, it
Mhm.
it is likely to be uncomfortable.
Right. I think it's also important to realize, which again, this is looking back from the other side of it. that we're allowed to take up space. We're allowed to protect our grieving space. Like that's, we sometimes feel like we owe them an explanation or the details, and you don't, and I'm sure that you deal with that a
Mhm.
lot. We think that we have to, or they'll be offended. And, you know, most people won't, honestly. And if they do, I mean, they'll have to come to that understanding on their own. You are entitled to take up space in that office or in that workplace and say, I'm not okay with discussing this right now. You have that right, not only like a legal right, but you have a moral right. That's your personal space. So I would encourage them to sort of claim that space and not be afraid or not feel like they owe anybody any kind of
Right.
story sharing or anything like that.
I know I shared with you before when we were talking that I was a hairstylist at the time
Mm.
of my loss, and so there would be 8 to 10 times a day, I would be retelling the story, and people, because they were my clients for years, they thought that that was certainly entitled for them,
Yeah.
and in some ways, maybe it was healing for me, I don't really know, but I know it was exhausting. I know if
Yeah.
nothing else, it was absolutely exhausting. And so, yeah, I do wish, I don't know, I sometimes think, wouldn't it have been fun to make some sort of a little tour or something like, here's what I want you to know. And this is it. This is all I'm talking about, and let's talk about something else. What do you have going on in your life?
Yes.
Because it
Yeah.
just was really, really tiring.
Everyone grieves differently.
For sure. That is the statement of the year, isn't it? I mean, it just is so many different layers to it. You have a virtual VA business,
Yes.
and tell me what that means exactly.
Right. So virtual assistants perform all kinds of tasks in the back end of other people's businesses. So it's fully remote, work from anywhere that has a solid Wi Fi connection, obviously. We do anything from basic administrative tasks to, customer service and help desk to all kinds of digital marketing, even graphic design, copywriting. All these things can fall under the umbrella of virtual assistants. And so it's a one-to-one relationship usually. Sometimes it's you joining a team, but you're a freelancer. So you're a 1099 contractor and the client is contracting you specifically to do a specific outlined group of tasks or, fulfill a certain role. So that's what virtual assistance is, and I help people get started and use the skills they already have to jump right into that industry.
That's amazing. And then do you have connections to get them
Yes,
the
client.
work?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
And how does that work for a mom? If if you have 1 or 2 kiddos at home, what does that day look like?
It depends. If your kids are really small, I always recommend try to fit as much work as you can in during nap time. Especially if you don't have other help or support at home to sort of intervene. Another thing I tell them is to get busy bags and kind of rotate through activities so they can sit sort of on the floor next to you and play nicely while you work. If you have older kids, you can schedule your work time around either when they're in school or if you homeschool, then while they're working on something independently or during whatever time you give them for, screen time or other activities that are, again, more independent from you. But I've worked in just about every environment with all of my kids at home. So I know where there's a will, there is a way for sure.
Me Well, it's such a great way to kinda have a little bit of the best of both worlds, even though I'm sure there's definitely some time management involved. But it's such a great way for moms to make a little extra income and be home with their kids.
Absolutely.
So, any other pieces of advice that you think someone should know as they're navigating this life after loss?
I think the number one thing that I tell everyone that I meet now that I can speak with about this topic is to get help and support. Do not try to do this alone. I think obviously coming to you, people like you who serve this community, who have been there, this is huge. There are therapists and they're wonderful. But if they haven't experienced a loss as you have, as I have, then they can't fully understand where you're coming from. And this isn't to say that you wouldn't need their services, but maybe you need, in addition to that, more help. Maybe you need some coaching, some more in-depth interaction. So I would recommend get connected to you, get that help, get on the road, the path to healing with someone who knows what you're going through, who has been there, who has dealt with all the things, trying to hold it all together, trying to return to work, trying to be present for your family that you have there with you. That's something that I think only somebody who's been there really gets. And you cannot, shouldn't say you can't do it alone, but you really shouldn't. It's so much harder. And I think that the healing is so much slower and sometimes doesn't actually even fully heal. That,
Yes, thank you for that. I really I do agree. I think there's so much unprocessed grief sometimes in people, and I think that we're trained to just keep going. Just
yeah,
keep going, it'll be okay, it happens, it's just one of those things, and then 10 years down the road, you're not doing so well because you never fully process this grief,
yeah.
and I think it sneaks up at different times, so yeah, I think any kind of help,
Mhm,
if you're noticing any of these things, and it does, grief will
mhm.
sneak back in.
And especially if it's been a while since you've experienced a loss, I think then it becomes ultra important to find the right coach or counselor that can help you who has been there because there's a fear of judgment when it comes to, well, it's been 5 years, it's been 10 years, and
Yeah.
that no therapist is going to understand. No one else is going to understand. Why am I still grieving over this? It's stupid. Well, it's not stupid at all. Of course, we know that because we've gone through it, but we fear that other people will think wrong
Oh,
of
for
us.
sure, yeah. Yeah, I think that is you're right, there are a few things in life where you have to have a very specific person, and only someone who has been through it would understand, and this is one of them.
This is one of
You
them.
just can't understand it unless you've been there.
Right?
So, yeah, that is so important. Did you find a therapist or support group or anything after your
Yeah.
loss?
I did join some support groups. I did go to therapy for a little while, but again, that's how I know that you need somebody who has been there, and I think there are so few people doing that work that you're doing. So thank you for
Mm.
being a little lighthouse on the cliff for us because it gets dark out here in the storm and not everyone understands where you're coming from. Like I said, especially if it's been some time since you've had that loss, it can be really
Yeah,
difficult. So yeah, I did explore those methods and it was
good.
helpful. I will definitely say it was helpful.
Yeah. Oh, I
But if you
think
get comfortable with
anything
them.
is anything is better than
Yes,
nothing.
don't just anything not alone, okay?
Mhm.
But yeah,
Anything is better than nothing, but it's yeah, when you can get really targeted help, it makes all
yeah,
the difference.
yeah, for sure.
So, well, thank you so much for sharing your story and your expertise. And where can
Mhm.
people find out more about you and this
Yeah.
amazing business that you've created out of I think too, your story is also one that is so inspiring to take the new person that you are after this loss because you're
Yeah.
never the same.
No.
So how do you take this new person that you've become and create something
Yeah.
really that makes your life so much better
Yes.
for this experience?
Yeah. Well, they can find me at vitalva.life and I'm on all the social media handles under Amy Figueroa Vital VA. So be
Okay.
glad to connect with anybody if they need somebody to talk to. I'm there for that too. So
Yeah, that's
reach out.
great. Very nice. Thank you. And I will be sure to link all of your information in the show notes so that they can look for you and get in touch with you if they're thinking of starting a new at-home career. I think it's definitely something that has been increasing in need,
Yes.
and I know a lot of my business friends use
Mm,
VAs,
yes.
and it's amazing. So
It's great
definitely a career
combination.
that's growing. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate your
Mhm.
time.
Thank you.